Okay, I'd like to call this Citizens Budget Review Advisory Committee meeting to order at 6 p.m. on July 10th. Let's have a roll call, please.
Mr. Flaherty? Mr. Hurley?
Here.
Mr. Slavin? Absent. Mr. Napier?
Present.
Mr. Frank?
Here.
Mr. Moda?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Hall is excused. Ms. Flaherty? Absent. Ms. Ring? Here. You have a quorum.
I have a question about, we
Chair,
have an
we didn't say the pledge.
Oh, but it's about roll call. We have an alternate member that has never shown up to any meeting. Is that our job to make a recommendation? Well, it's been three, at least three.
My understanding is the clerk's office monitors that and that she would be following up.
So we don't have to deal with it.
No, it goes back between who appointed her to address that.
Just soon let the clerk handle it. Well, this is still a roll call. Okay, we'll pledge of allegiance. Would everyone please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I kind of jumped around a little bit there. I put the roll call first, but that's okay. Approval of the minutes from the June 19th meeting, and
I would like
pass
to
it on
make.
to anybody, I have a question here about. Did you put this together, Andrea?
Yes, I did.
What is this when the chair was called out of order? I was at that meeting, and I don't remember any such thing happening. Does anybody else remember that? It's not on the video, nor is it on, I don't know, what are you referring to?
That is my problem. It is not on the video, you are correct.
What didn't happen?
I remember it happening, and I don't know and that was my question. I was going to ask the rest of the committee if they remember anything.
Are you saying the chair called somebody out of order, or the chair was called out of order?
Chair was called out of order. And
I would be the one to do that. That's up to the chair. And I called no one out of order.
I called you out of order when you did not present the information, the motion correctly. I called you out of order.
Well, I overruled you.
But it is right. You are correct. It's not on our video, and I was just wondering if anybody else, because my memory of what the official video is and my memory of it is different. And I just wanted to ask the committee if anybody else had a different memory or remembered you being called out of order.
Well, if you have an issue like that in the future, you just say point of order. Then the chair will rule on the point of order.
My issue is that the minutes are not reflective of the actual meeting. The minutes do reflect the video, but the video, in my opinion, is not a complete meeting, actual meeting.
Well, these minutes are not verbatim minutes. They're just to take place at what happened, and this issue never happened. That nobody was called out of order. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a done issue, and we can go ahead and look at approving the minutes. But I mean, if you want to make a motion, make it.
That we let other people look at the official video? I mean, has anybody looked at the official video and then compared it to what they remembered? Because the official video is short.
If I may make a comment based on past experience, the video recording that is made here is made continuously from beginning to end. I seriously doubt that anybody edited it because it is put up on YouTube generally the next morning, and there's no reason that I know of or ever heard of and I think it's probably policy, that they are not, I underline not, the recordings are not edited. So I sincerely believe that what you saw is what you get, and that's what happened.
I'll entertain a motion on the minutes.
So moved.
Seconded.
Hey, I have comments from reading through the minutes.
Okay?
On page 3, in the, I guess we're going down to the second full paragraph, he stated that a referendum has been passed. I don't think that referendum has even been voted on.
That's correct. Not till
That
November.
referendum has been, I would propose that the wording be changed to referendum has, I think it's been scheduled, right? Yes. Would be a better way to say that, but that referendum has not passed. And if we go down 2 more paragraphs into the middle of that paragraph, it says the upcoming budgets, the remaining, you were talking, Ken, about the reserves, and 1/2 of the expense for the early retirement, and the remaining will be repaid. No, I don't like the word upcoming. It's being repaid in the 16-17 budget cycle, right? The current one. Or am I wrong with that?
All but $92,000 is being repaid in this year. Next year's needs to have the final
Right.
92,000.
That was my understanding.
So the remaining balance, well, so 1/2 is being, when you say it was repaid, that's being repaid in the current year's budget cycle? Or was that repaid even last year?
Okay. 1/2 was scheduled to be repaid out of the 2017 budget that we're in.
Okay,
During the year, I believe it was February, that a motion was introduced by council to put a cap on the R&R fund, and that was like $94,000 that was specifically, they made a motion specifically to apply that towards the repayment. So if you minus off the $182,000, half of the cost, minus the 92, we still have 92 remaining.
yeah, but that's going to be paid out of the current year activity, right? Out of the 16-17 budget cycle, that'll be netted out and finished by September 30th.
Not
No.
exactly, because that net amount goes as possibly an addition to the R&R fund to replenish it, to get it back up to the
Okay,
275,000.
so it has to wait until we close the books and we see exactly what the final position is. Okay.
But that final position, like I say, applies to the R&R unless it's not.
Just a
unless it's not
technicality
needed.
of the way I'm reading it. Okay, thank you. And then I will go over to page 5 and just a couple of grammatical things. Down in the middle, there's a very short sentence that he thanked Mr. Kilgore for it's not at the end is his. Mr. Frank stated that, made a valid point, he thanked Mr. Kilgore. In the draft minutes I have, the word is and it should be his. And then if we go down into the next paragraph in the middle, it says, Mr. Kilgore, there was quite a bit of road work we were talking about for in the last 2 years, so it was his opinion, not it was Mr. Kilgore's opinion. I don't think can have an opinion. I actually do read these, and you know I do.
I think I probably used the word thinking that, based on the city engineer's judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's certainly not my
I'm a little
judgment.
confused on that one, Bruce. Is there a question there? Is there a
Well,
correction? that
no,
needs to be-
I'd like the word "the" opinion, I'd like the word "the" changed to "his."
Okay. Did you get those 2 or 3 grammatical changes?
Yeah, there are 3 changes then that I would submit.
We can approve the minutes as corrected. Those are just grammatical errors. Scribner's errors, that's not a big deal.
Okay.
Mr. Napier, I'll
Yeah.
get the minutes corrected in the final version to the city clerk in the morning.
That'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes for the June 19th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
One abstained. I
Excuse me?
abstained. I will abstain. Thank you.
I'm not sure you can abstain. I think you'd have to vote yes or no.
I would.
You need to either vote yes or no.
No.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 to 1. 5 for, 1 against. Andrea was against. She was the no vote. Okay. Okay, Ken, you're on, buddy.
Okay, what I've done is taken the presentation I gave at the previous meeting, where I kind of outlined the budget, and tried to modify it or just to add corrections to it from what was presented at that time, plus added a few other sheets. Our focus tonight, I think, is on the proposed millage rate and the general fund budget. So I'm not going to focus or go into, some of these pages about the enterprise funds and special revenue funds tonight. I'm always available for questions if you should have something on that. But so I just outlined it like I did before. I did want to throw in this slide. This is the actual motion that the City Council made back on February 8th of 2017. I've heard different versions quoted, so I just wanted to make sure the committee understood exactly what that motion was. Now, I did follow some discussion about preferring the rollback rate, but it evolved into this motion, so I just wanted to make sure y'all had the precise language, maintain our quality of life. That's the judgment thing, so.
I took that to mean the level of service equals what was in this budget this year and next year's budget. Oh, I'm sorry. I took that to mean the level of service remaining the same next year as it is this year.
But that's exactly my point. I mean, some people could view it and say, well, what's our quality of life in 20 years? And are we doing everything today what that we need to? But just wanted to clarify. Since we had the original draft of the budget, I've sent you out correction sheets to tell you what staff has done to modify those figures once we had the certified millage on the DR 420 forms. So we tweaked the revenues a bit with the ad valorem taxes, got it down to a 3.4 millage. We looked at the airport charges for what we charge general fund services, reevaluated that, and felt like we were charging too much. So we reduced the revenues for that amount and basically plugged $431 just so we could get the end result to be exactly the amount of the payback of the reserves. I know that plug is a bad word in accounting sense, but that's basically what we did. On the expenditure side, we had a need in administrative services to upgrade one of our positions. We had a minor fuel tank adjustment there for the cost of cleaning that on it's a monthly charge. We took the opportunity, but an additional maintenance worker had been asked to be added to the stormwater fund, so we took that opportunity to fund $48,000 for that position's wages and benefits. We looked at the community development department and part of our original projection was to have an additional community development director added to the budget. That was already in the numbers. But this person is going to also be in charge of the CRA activities downtown, so we wanted to add some consulting services because coming new on board, depending on their qualifications, maybe they can, maybe they can't, but part of what we have planned is the CRA master plan update, so we thought that was precautionary. We had struck the city engineer position for financial reasons, but we also wanted, as a countermeasure to that, since we had the ability to, we added $10,000 into engineering services for contractual work, as opposed to having someone on salary. The last one, I think Mr. Hoffman actually made me go back to the insurance accounts and look at those. We did an RFP last year and got a new insurance carrier, and part of that deal was a 2-year guarantee on the rate. When we looked at our projection, or our current year charges, we also found we had made an error in the coding. We charged something to the property and liability insurance account that should have been in the mix on our workers' comp and distributed between departments. So when we pulled that out, that was 40 grand that offset some of the things like the maintenance worker that we wanted to add. So the net increase on the expense side was $42,391. I added this slide as a little reconciliation between the payback of the voluntary retirement program and what we'll be doing in next year's budget to finally settle up the final $91,252 balance. Now, if I know Bruce, he's looking at that and saying, those numbers aren't right. and you're correct. The $94,521 on the R&R account adjustment, that should have also been bracketed as a minus. And down below, a revenue reduction of the 2009-35 should also have been bracketed. The sums are correct using that, with that correction. Some of the other slides were just some overviews that we, showing that we, on a total basis, reduced expenses by 1.6%, and we are still showing a 1.3% additional in revenues over what was budgeted last year. So don't be confused. I think in some cases we compare to our current year projected versus the current year budget, but I stuck to a comparison to the budgeted revenues and expenses. Down below is just a summary. We do end up adding a net of 3 positions instead of 2 full-time, and the number of part-time stays the same at 1 addition. Here again, it's just a summary, so the numbers that changed by category were in personnel cost and operating expenses. So I've shown you the new numbers there. The net budget decrease is $190,850. This gets into the detail of what position changes we had. Shows the change in the city engineer position, plus now we have 2 maintenance workers added in the stormwater division. We are still, it's still pending negotiations on what kind of pay increases are negotiated with the for the employees. And the medical insurance, we've already got indications that 10% may be light. They've gone back to renegotiate with the initial numbers the insurance carrier, our current carrier, gave us. And if we don't like that final number that they come back with, we will be doing a complete RFP to get solicitation, to solicit quotes from other companies. Here again, this is a summary in detail of what the changes were and how they net out as far as the amount of operating cost, the non-personnel type operating cost. The capital purchases and transfers, nothing changed on that. The ad valorem tax amount, of course, was changed as far as our balancing tactics. Everything else is still the same assumptions. Just a reminder on the negotiations of the pay increases and health insurance. The other two comments there have been addressed. They're no longer a contingency. And as I said, I'm not going to go into all the enterprise or special revenue funds. On property taxes, we had a very healthy amount of change from our initial estimate. It went from $90 million to $125 million as far as taxable property values, and that's a 12.1% increase in our taxable values. So that was pleasant news. I should point out on the second bullet there, the amount, if we went with the same 3.8 millage, would be $329,215 more than we currently have in our draft budget. At the 3.4 millage, it's only $4,099 different than we had in our draft, which, if you recall, our draft number that we used was the same amount of revenue that we had in the current year budget. Thought it might be helpful just to show our recent histories on the amount of tax roll additions. Very steep rise this year. Unfortunately, I sent this PowerPoint and the agenda materials out, and then about 20 minutes later, I got a notice from the property appraiser's office that the numbers were incorrect. So this is no longer correct information. The 3.4 millage, however, is 10.5% lower than the 3.8 mils. So if nobody was reassessed at the 3.4 millage, the homestead property should pay about $20 a year less if they've got a $100,000 save our homes value. And commercial would pay $40 a year less.
Ken, if I may interrupt. Okay, I'm looking at the last email I got from you, which was Friday, June 30th, where you said that the changes from the property appraiser's office, right, created a rollback rate of 3.49.
That was my mistake. When I actually went to do the forms, I found out it should be 34939. The last digit instead of a 0 should have read a 9.
Okay. But how do you get to the 3.4 on your PowerPoint presentation? I guess the two numbers I'm looking at were real close in that email, 34939, 34986. Where'd the 3.4 come from?
The 3.4986.
No, on your PowerPoint now. Where'd the 3.4 come from?
Okay, once we took another look at it after our initial draft of the budget and we reconsidered, like on the maintenance worker, and found the insurance problem, we felt like we could balance, we basically balanced the budget, leaving the payback to the reserve, but only using the revenue that was equivalent to a 3.4 millage rate. We backed into it, in other words.
So what you're saying is that in reality, you're willing to go back past the rollback rate?
Yes.
Even in light of the idea that we have this referendum for a homestead exemption addition?
Let me qualify. We feel like 3.4 is an amount of millage based on what we know today. We are still going to propose to the city council that they consider the same millage rate as last year, the 3.8. Because anything can happen, for one thing, between now and September. And if you all of a sudden realize, oh, we should have gone higher than 3.4, you're going to have to deal then with notifying everybody by first-class mail that their taxes are going to be different than their tax notice the property appraiser is going to use. So we're still saying 3.8 is the magic number for the proposed millage, but barring anything else happen, we can balance the budget at 3.4. In later slides, I'm going to make a further point about the state's action on the referendum for the additional homestead exemption and the impact that will have, that some would think we should maybe go ahead and be planning for, even though it's several years out. Pretty much have just covered the comments on this slide. I thought it'd be useful. We've also heard comments about, well, if we propose a millage of a certain rate, then we're locked in. You know, the final action by the council in September would never be any different than what we proposed at this point. So I just gave a historical, going back to 2007. You can see there's more red numbers than black, and there is a few blue ones. The red means that the final millage, for instance, was less in 2012 than the 3.7311 rollback, but it was the same as proposed. But the 4 years prior to that, 2008 to 2011, the proposed was a higher amount. The city council did reduce it between the amount proposed and the final millage that was set those years. Happened again this past year, where we proposed the 3.8556. They adopted it for the purposes of the tax notices, but then at the final budget hearing, they went back down to 3.8 even. This slide had been presented before, just talking about the impact, assuming the increased homestead exemption was adopted. And I presented this information too, but it really is the negative part about what the state did, because they are enhancing the problem that I consider an unfairness, that the commercial properties pay a higher percentage of their just value than homestead properties do currently. Right now, the amount of taxable value for those that aren't homesteaded is like almost 83%, where a homestead property only pays 40% because of exemptions and because of Save Our Homes. If you assume, and we don't know yet what that number is going to be, if the additional exemption does pass, my best guess, it's between 120 million to 130 million. There would be additional exemptions. So I've given you a few ranges there. So we're going from what today is 40% of a homesteaded property is being paid in taxes versus going down to 28 or 29%. And my last little slide, I just wanted to show you now, assuming adoption of the 3.4 mills, our total revenues would be $3,797,000. $1,625,000 comes from homesteaded properties, and $2,172,000 comes from commercial and non-homestead properties. So homestead properties are paying 43% of the amount of revenue we get from ad valorem taxes. Assuming $120 million of additional homestead exemptions, then that ratio changes, where homesteaded properties would only be paying 36%, 36.2%, of our total tax revenues, and commercial properties would then be paying 64%. And it gets even worse, the higher that exemption is at 130, commercial would be paying 66.9% of our total tax revenue coming to the city for police and fire, or excuse me, police, public works, and administration of the city. Bad bill. So I'm done. Be glad to take questions.
Not at this
Michael?
point, Ken, thank you.
Andrea?
None for me, thank you.
Sergio? Bruce?
No, very, very good. I can't believe we can balance at 3.4 below the rollback rate. That just
I tell you,
has me taken back.
I can tell you the credit goes to the early retirement program, because that $371,000 investment freed up monies, and it's allowed us, even though we've reconsidered on some of the positions that were vacated with that program, didn't come out exactly the way we thought it would, but we still have a savings that, because, you know, the $180,000 in this year's budget paying back the reserves. Well, that, in next year, 180 goes away, now it's 90. The year after that, you won't have the 90 to repay again. So biggest issue in my mind and the biggest threat in my mind, because, well, as I know previous committees always took the position on reserves, that as long as we got the reserves, we can weather a storm. Well, we had a storm, and we've had a really big bill on the docks that we're going to be paying. And the payback from FEMA is, I wouldn't say it's so questionable getting the fund, but then you've always got that risk that we fall into the trap of other cities, that money is requested to be paid back 5 years from now. So I'm seeing our reserves going from our magic $5 million number to just above $4 million by the end of this year, assuming we pay for the docks. Who knows, hopefully in next fiscal year, by that time we'll have the reimbursement of the docks, at least the percentages that can be recovered, and get us back into the $5 million. But, you know, this was a light storm. A heavy storm this season, you know, does the $4 million become $2 million or $1 million? So that's the only thing that keeps me up at night.
You good, Bruce?
Well, I guess my only recommendation would be, and it's just, you know, it's always nice to roll back, and it makes everybody look happy. You know, the answer is, once it's given back, if in the next year, or in the even 2 years out with that referendum, if you got to increase the millage rate again, boy, what a squabble people will have if it has to go back up 40 mils.
And actually on that
Oh,
last
right.
slide, I should have made that.
Yes, that's just, you know, you just wonder if people would understand enough without it becoming a total nightmare.
Yeah, I failed to make the point on this last slide on the effect of the homes, or on the amount of proceeds we get. Backing into it with the $130 million additional homestead exemption, assuming that is taken away from us, the millage would have to go up to 3.82 mils to equal the 3.4 mil level. So I backed into the millage rate that would be necessary to provide the same amount of proceeds.
But that doesn't assume any growth in the tax roll. That
Really?
assumes the same tax roll that you got now. So
Assuming,
if you have a 12% growth in your tax roll, that's going to almost be negligible.
Unless our expenses increase by 12% to serve those people that are added, or those additional residents, or...
Well, you know, I've expressed, I think, even Mr. Hurley has the same concern. You know, the idea is you have to be living under a mushroom to believe that that referendum initiative is not going to pass. Who wouldn't vote for that? I mean, it's like, yeah, sure, put money back in my pocket. Of course, they don't realize on the other end what that does to municipal budgets, so, yeah.
Well, it's kind of short-sighted on their end, too, in my judgment, because that affects people's ability to spend, and spending in this state based on sales tax revenues that supports the state, it hurts the state budget, too. So they shot themselves as well as us in the foot, I think.
I think this goes back, I agree with Bruce, and this goes back to something that I brought up at the last meeting, which was kind of a stretch of discussing the whole idea of what was going to happen with this referendum. And I think we've got to assume, I agree with you, I think we've got to assume, because it looks so nice to the voters, that they're going to approve it. Depending, and I doubt this will happen, depending on how much flack is put up by the municipalities or people representing the municipalities, that this is the wrong way to go, that it's like a teeter-totter, so that the state is down, we're going to have to go the other way and bring it back up. So how are we going to do it? We're going to raise the millage rate. So if we've got to raise $300,000 to $500,000 in a single year, as Bruce just said, it's going to be fairly horrifying. I suspect, rather than just a few people at the budget meeting, that this hall might be filled. And the city council meetings in September will be overfilled. And historically, in this city, we don't see anybody because the city has been fiscally very sound and continues that way. So in our considerations later on, we may want to look at the wild idea of building up some funding in case this happens. But we'll talk about that later.
Well, I have no questions on the general fund part, but I got the thing for the roads. I'm going to hit the capital budget just a hair anyway. I'd still like to see another $500,000 put in the road projects, because I'm looking at, when I look at this map, I see a lot more gray than I see color. There's a lot more streets on there that don't look like they've been, and I know they're mostly local roads, but if we put it in the budget and you don't spend it, you don't spend it. I'd still like to see an extra $500,000 in road repair, and that's all I'm going to say. Thanks. Good job, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Public input. Any member of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff matters. Ken, you're on again.
I have nothing in addition to report. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to board matters, and under comments and discussions by individual board members, I'm going to turn it over to Ed first to go over his PowerPoint that I hope everybody had a chance to look at. Okay, Ed, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to go down and actually go through the PowerPoint, and so we can discuss it as we go along and make changes, comments, so on and so forth. We're able to change this before Wednesday. It's not a problem. There we go.
Now, do you want us to raise questions? Did you go through this, or you want us to wait till you do your presentation? How would you prefer?
Why don't we do it as we go along?
Okay.
Because then we won't miss anything, or hopefully won't. Okay, so the discussions that we've had are fairly obvious. We've discussed the budget, the general fund budget. We've listened to Ken explain in detail the payback of the retirement program to the general fund, and that's well in hand. Roads. Larry just brought up an interesting thing, and that's why there's a question mark here. The last couple of 3 years, at least 2, this committee has recommended more money for roads. And that goes in line with what the council has said. On the other side, to balance that, we've made a lot of progress on the worst of the roads. But the question is, do we need more money to catch up? I don't necessarily have an answer for that. My own personal opinion is we've got, what is the number, the actual number on the roads? We've got $500,000, okay? I don't necessarily think that, I don't know whether the city can handle another $500,000 physically.
They did this year.
Yeah, they had some pretty heavy-duty stuff. They may not have as much next year. I don't know the answer to that, but we could discuss that, that extra money under the last slide in the presentation, which I stuck in there just for talking purposes. So moving on, the golf course, they're going to start paying back that irrigation loan. The airport is going to be paying back their loan. Indian River Lagoon funding has been put together in the stormwater fund along with the septic and sewer. And that can be moved around, as Ken has told us. Question again there of funding, do we want to recommend any more money in the septic to sewer fund? Something to consider. Public safety, for the first time, we're adding some patrolmen, which we sorely needed. And city staff changes, we're going to, I think the most important thing is we're going to get a community development director, which we sorely needed. So that'll be a good move.
Can we go back to that septic to sewer fund just a minute?
Yep.
I think probably what we've got in the budget, what's in the proposed budget, is going to be okay, because I would imagine it's going to take the county 12 to 15 months to get that pipe in the ground and get it operational before they start taking any flow. So you're not going to find too many people taking those grants because it's not going to be there yet.
On the other hand, remember that there's a fair number of people who are on the existing system, who are next to the existing system. I mean, I can think of one right off the top of my head who made an application, and that's when we were, I don't know whether we were, Ken, were we giving $5,000 or $10,000 in the septic and to sewer thing originally, way back, a couple of years ago? Anyway, it wasn't as much as we're doing now. And
We got the additional.
Now, they can use that
Additional
grant to
grant
pay the
money for
impact fees as well, correct?
The county
To
pitches
pay
in
the county's impact fees for sewer?
100,000, yes.
Yeah, the $27.96 per ERU.
Yes.
so anyhow, there are a fair number of people who are not, especially along Indian River Drive, who are not on the system. Some of them are fairly large. I could be totally wrong on this one, but off the top of my head, there is a particular bar and grill that I believe is still on a individual system, right next to the lagoon. Not so, that's something to think about. And I think there are a fair number of others along the way. So there we are on that one. This one pretty well speaks for itself. The dollars are the dollars. The pay increase up to 3%, we know about. We've got small changes in the operating expense, and we've got that $91,000 paid back in this one, and that finishes that retirement payback thing. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. Okay, there's the road repaving. Road repaving and reconstruction. Reconstruction is when you really get down below all the asphalt and have to grind up the base. That's when you really have a bad road. But we've got $500,000 there. Got $400,000 for a new DPW garage design. We haven't discussed that very much, other than I think Ken has said the idea is to move the DPW garage from its present location to the airport on Roseland Road, and the idea is to sell that property and make some money. Because if you remember, some of you may remember, the city not long ago bought a little piece of property on 512 East, which gives us good access right off 512 into that property, into the DPW garage. As we said, there's no new funding on sewer connectivity, all aboard Florida. Who knows where that's going, but we're not going to fund it anymore. The working waterfront phase 3, we would put it off again. We've got the golf course payback and the airport paybacks, as we discussed. There's the lagoon funding and the sewer connectivity. So we've got all of that lumped together. And there's the
Now, those numbers there, that 240 and that 284 will roll over to next year's budget if nobody draws on it this year, right, Ken? So that will stay in the bucket for sewer connectivity.
Yeah, those are earmarked.
So that gives us a little over $500,000 in there right now.
Correct.
And who knows where this will go. The council has, in the recent past, talked about, underlying talk, not, I don't think they really considered it at the point, of raising the amount of money that they were going to give to each individual. Of course, the question is, what do you do with the people you've already given it to? But at least it was discussed. So that's where we are on the septic to sewer. As I said, to public safety, we're adding some people, and as Ken said, we have realized a good saving on the retirement plan for people. Okay. I think we've got a wrong number in here, but let me go through it. The property values, we've talked about the 12.3%. The 3.8, same as this year, raises. That 457 is not correct, is it? It's 342, right?
Correct.
All right, I've got to fix that, and I've got a circle around it. Okay. So that number is 342 and change.
Yeah, why don't you just slide that bullet with 3.8 out of there? Just slide that bullet out of there. Instead of changing the amount of money, just totally delete the 3.8 mils.
Why would you do that?
Because the budget's funded at 3.4.
No. What we wanted, the point, Larry, is what we wanted is I believe we're going to recommend. We're going to
Voted on and
recommend
approved, yes.
that the DR 420 be 3.8. And we point out to council that that raises 342,000 and change beyond the present budget.
But that's contrary to council's direction to this committee, is it not?
Well, all we're doing.
Money's going to go in the general fund.
No, wait a minute.
If you recommend that millage rate, that additional money will be in the general fund, which is obviously more than we need to fund the general fund budget as it's stated right now.
Now, let's back up. We're recommending the 3.8 for the DR 420. That isn't, the council will vote in September on what the final millage rate will be, and it can
Right.
be anywhere from 3.8 down. Now, they can vote on the 3.4, end of story.
I
But they've
understand how
got
it
the
works.
flexibility, and as Ken said, there are things that could come up between now and September. What if the health insurance goes up 8%? Big number. Got to change the millage.
10%'s covered, so if it's 8, you still got a 2% savings. He's got 10% in the budget now for health insurance increases.
But if it goes up another 8%,
Oh,
it's
The initial,
18%. I just picked a number out
that
of
would
the
be an
air.
issue, yeah.
excuse me?
Then we're in trouble. Well, we don't want to be in trouble. The other thing, and that's the last slide, so that 457 is wrong, it's 342,000, and 362. So the question comes down to, we're going to vote again, I assume, to recommend the 3.8 for the DR 420, same as last year. But here's the question. If does this committee want to offer options to the council to consider? Roads, and maybe septic to sewer. There's a third thing, and this is the sort of crazy idea that I broached at the last meeting, is do we want to consider raising some money to cushion the possibility that change in the homestead exemption will occur? And as Ken said, we're looking at $300,000 to $500,000 loss. Do we at least want to be able to ease into that? I don't know the answer to that. It's just an idea.
Well, that won't affect this budget anyway. That will not affect the fiscal 18
Oh,
budget.
I know that, but do we want to say to Ken, establish an account over here, possibility of change in homestead exemption, a pot, and you put the money in the pot and it sits there, okay? It's like the general fund reserve, so this is the homestead reserve, okay? To cushion things, just an idea, but that's what we're here for, you know? I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just throwing it out there for you guys and gals to talk about again, because we're going to council on Wednesday. There you are. This page can get wiped out in a second and won't show at council time if you don't want to do any of it. So, what's your pleasure? Mr. Napier wants to spend some money on
Is that
roads.
the last page in your presentation?
Yep.
Can we back up to the general fund reserve page? I seem to have missed that one.
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about that.
That number right there.
4,000,008?
Yeah, where'd you get that number?
Oh, good. That's Ken's number.
I provided that. It does include actually it ties to the last quarterly report.
Oh, okay, it's not to the CAFR,
Oh, no. It's modified by the,
second quarter report, the one through March,
yes.
but it doesn't have the cost for the docks taken out of it, or does it? That was my question. Does this got the 1.4 million for the docks and piers reduced out of it?
No, that bill's not been paid out of that. are reduced by that.
And I'm glad you asked me to back up, because besides that, the 2 lines at the bottom, something we've always done, doesn't necessarily say that this committee wants to do it, but I hope you do, because I feel very strongly about it. We only recommend borrowing from the fund, and we do that very judiciously. The council is aware of that. Last year, 2 years ago, they borrowed the money for the retirement program. Now we've proven we can do it. We've paid it back. So we've got that fund. So we only recommend borrowing, no permanent withdrawals, unless we have a disaster. That's what it's for, okay? And hopefully you all feel that the same way. So we've got that. So this is where we stand at the moment, is to approve, whether you want to approve the 3.8 for the DR 420. Okay? It's not the final rate. It's just for, it's the cap rate. It's the top rate. So we don't get trapped and have to send out first-class mail to everybody. Costs a lot of money. And then what do you want to do with this? Talk about it? Not talk about it? Scrap it? Go forward?
Let me put this on. That roads to septic increase on that actually got voted down by this committee at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So we could talk about that again like we do the millage.
Right.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good, Ed, thanks. Anyone have any other questions for Ed?
No, I think the presentation, Ed, is good. Last page is questionable.
That's why it said options.
Right.
And that was put in to stimulate conversation. Okay? We'll leave that up there.
Okay, since he's finished and we're on comments and discussions of other board members, I think we started down at this end last time. Bruce, we'll start with you this time.
I have nothing in particular to add to it, except that last page. I can be persuaded in either direction. No offense, Larry, but I think our roads are okay, and I would defer the road thing to the city engineer. Septic to sewer, I think we got a bunch of money already set aside, and I think we're fine there. My biggest concern that I would say is looking into the future and understanding that this referendum's coming, and I would think the majority of people would say it's going to pass, which will have an impact. I look at it as an individual where you look at your own family expenses and you know you got to drop a revenue coming in 2 years. I don't think you want to drop your revenue while you're working right now in light of the fact you may be retiring 2 years from now and see a drop in revenue. But that's open to each individual's debate. I'm a much more financially conservative individual than most people are. And Ken, I fully support, and we've done this one before, but I fully support keeping the general fund exactly where it is, and we don't deplete the fund balance. Because if we've used out $1 million plus just to have to pay out of funds to carry ourselves for the last year, can't imagine what a storm of a significant magnitude would require from our initial outlays to get things back into shape before we try and collect. I understand City Council's desire not to increase the tax revenue, and I'm okay with that. I don't, that's their, but wow, to roll back, go to 3.4 to balance, even past the rollback rate, wow. Unbelievable.
Ed?
As Bruce just pointed out, and making the presentation down there, and you think about it as you're going along speaking, I think I'll work backwards. I think the septic to sewer is probably in pretty good shape. I think I agree with that. The road situation, $500,000 is pretty good. And that was a staff recommendation. That wasn't something we came up with. The staff came up with that. So they were out there looking at the roads. Hopefully they picked up the majority of the problems. There are always things that will crop up, but you know, I could leave the roads alone. But what I have to share with Bruce, the concern about this homestead exemption. This could materially set us back. And this city has done an exceptionally good job of coming out of the recession of 08, 09, and building back infrastructure, capital equipment, from computers to trucks to diggers. We've done a heck of a job, you know, and that's pretty amazing. And I'll also say it again, this city has one of the lowest tax rates in the state. And we really are very low tax. I'm absolutely amazed. And talk to other people in other cities and tell them what I pay on my house, and they just look at me. You got to be crazy. Anyhow, but I'm concerned whether we should establish the pot and put some money in it and say to council, we think you ought to establish a pot, and if you go to 3.8, you can put 342,000 in it. If you go somewhere between 3.4 and 3.8, whatever that raises, you can put that in the pot. You decide. But we think you ought to develop a cushion, a pot. Enough said at the moment.
Michael?
Bruce, he well summarized my thoughts on this, and he echoed my sentiments. Us going forward here, as proposed, and in bold in Ed's PowerPoint presentation, we're able to fund staff's requests and this existing year's budget at that rollback rate. You make valid points about looking into the crystal ball of the future here and seeing we're going to have reduced revenues. Okay. Like Larry said in the last meeting, by the time that's actually approved, implemented, and hashed out, we're almost 3 years out. And one thing I'll add to that, it's a static versus dynamic conversation. If our property values, maybe not as robust as this time, advance, and we don't roll back, I think we can mitigate that with the rollback rate of 3.4. And I don't think it's going to be quite the shock to the system. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be that quite shock to the system. So, as it stands right now, I think I've got my mind pretty much made up on the rollback rate. That's all.
Andrea?
Okay, we don't have to decide rollback right now, is that correct? The only thing we're deciding is what we're going to say Wednesday at council meeting. Am I correct?
The what he's balanced the budget on is 3.4, which is actually a little bit below the rollback rate.
And the last slide then is the 3.8 I'm trying to understand where the 3.8, the 3.4 will get us no additional income, right? The 3.8, but we don't need to decide that today. All we need to do is decide what the top rate is. Am I correct in that one? Just the 3.8 would be the top rate.
Well, it's a recommendation to the city council, so when they have Ken set the tentative millage levy and turn the DR 420 into David Nolte and the tax collector, that number's what the committee recommended.
Okay.
But the budget itself is funded at the 3.4 rate, which is actually below rollback.
Okay. I would still want to see the 3.8, because we can always come down. We can't go up, but we can always come down. So I'd like to see the 3.8 for Wednesday. And then I would also like to see the additional funding, because in the future, I would rather have my taxes be more stable than up and down. And if we do a little bit of an increase, and council will tell us what that increase would be, then we could just save that money and have a more flat increase rather than having ups and downs. And me, personally, I would rather see it be flat and be steady. That, to me, would be the best way to go. Thank you.
Sergio?
I agree with the 3.8, and I also agree with the concept that Ed introduced, which is having some sort of pot, having some sort of special homestead reserve fund in order to anticipate what's going to come in the future. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, I for one, I'm still at the 3.4. I mean, to me, that's even better than the rollback rate, so I'm still there. I was one of the ones that voted against that motion the last time, so I guess the only thing we really need to talk about is, do we want to readdress the 3.8 or just let it go, since that's already recommended? And if we do the 3.8, then we voted down recommending that the money be spent for sewer and roads, and we all seem to concur that there's enough money in those adequately for this year. So do we really need to readdress these issues? Because I think both votes were 5-2. And that's in this minutes here. And that's kind of, and I would like to see another $500,000 put in the road repaving, and if they can't get to it like they did this year, you don't use it, you don't spend it.
Larry, could I
Anybody
comment?
else? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just an idea on the pot, the homestead pot, let's call it that for the moment. Instead of making an absolute, let's back up. The committee's going to recommend the DR 420 be at 3.8, okay? And the city council could, in the fall could say, okay, we're going to go with the 3.4, end of story, that takes care of everything. But give them the option between now and when they consider in September, bring up the subject of the pot. Don't put a specific amount on it, but say, council, this is something you need to consider that probably is going to happen. The electorate will probably vote for the homestead exemption. Do you want to consider establishing a pot for your discussion? We discussed it, and we're bringing up the subject, period. We'll try that out.
That would be another vote.
Yeah.
So
Then I'll put
I
the
would need a
motion, I'll
motion
put
on
the
that.
motion on the floor that Ed's presentation minus the last slide be presented on Wednesday to City Council with the idea that we recommend a 3.8 for the 420 disclosure, and that we, in line with Mr. Frank's comments, that we support the city administration's budget with the 3.4 rate, but that we seriously want them to give, and help me out if you don't like my choice of words here, a serious thought and consideration to this future homestead exemption referendum, which will require a tax increase at some time in the future.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Now, let me paraphrase that, if I may,
Yeah,
if
go
I
right
understand it correctly. That motion is to recommend the 3.8 to city council for the tentative millage levy,
Right, for
and
the tentative
just say,
millage.
set aside any amount of money they choose, not a specific amount, for the homestead exemption pot.
No, let me go back. I was saying, yeah, the 3.8 is for the 420 disclosure, and we already had voted to do that.
That's correct.
And I'm saying I support Mr. Frank's idea that we tell city council we fully support the city's budget for 17-18 at the 3.4 rate as presented, but that we would ask them to give serious consideration to the future impact of the homestead referendum.
Bruce, would you consider just going a few more words and saying, council, for your consideration, might you want to consider establishing a pot?
They can always vote it
homestead
down.
pot.
We're not recommending it to them.
No.
We're just saying, here's something for consideration.
For your consideration.
Consideration or thought.
I'll second that.
Great.
So you just want to make a recommendation that they use the 3.8, and any extra money they get, consider setting aside a pot for the homestead exemption increase. Am I correct?
Yep.
Is that clear? Is that motion clear to you? Okay, and we have a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Just merely
Anyone?
a suggestion. Good.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Mr. Herlihy?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin is absent. Mr. Napier?
No.
Mr. Frank?
Yes.
Mr. Moda?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Ring?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-1.
Yep.
Okay, Larry, what I'm going to do is I'll write that slide just from that, and I'll give it to Ken send it to Ken in the morning. He'll send it out so you can see it, because they don't want anything up here you haven't seen.
Right.
And if there's anything wrong with it, get back to Ken.
We can discuss, we've got another meeting scheduled for the 30th? 31st, the end of July. And we could always discuss it again. Okay, I appreciate that, Ed. But I'm just wondering if we might be better off just giving a memo with bullet points to the city council. Because the PowerPoint seems to be, I mean, you did a good job on it, but it seems to me to be very redundant of everything that's already in the budget, in the document itself.
They like to hear it,
Okay.
believe it or not.
I think it makes a difference when you have a person that's presenting it instead of just looking at a piece of paper and the bullet points. It makes a difference when you have someone that's, actually explaining to the council members instead of them trying to interpret what's on a piece of paper.
Thank you, Sergio. But we've found in the last few years that helps a lot, because just a piece of history, 4 years ago, when we made a very strong recommendation to add more money, totally contrary to what the council was going to do, we made the presentation and we won. And that money went into roads.
Okay, next item is discussion of topics for the next meeting. And I just redo the same agenda, Ken. That looks fine to me. It seems to work very well. Anybody else have anything they'd like to see on there? Any other matters for the good of the order? This meeting's adjourned.